December wrapped the city in silence, but inside Windermere Airport, noise was everywhere, rushed footsteps, muted announcements, and the constant hum of lives in transit. Outside, snow fell softly against the glass, untouched by the chaos within. Camille Renner stepped off the plane like someone walking through a dream that wouldn't end. She was 27, worn thin by the kind of heartbreak that doesn't just bruise, but lingers. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the scarf around her neck, dragging her suitcase through the terminal like it carried more than clothes, like it carried everything she hadn't said. She was back in Eldom City, not because she wanted to be, but because when everything else falls apart, home is the only place left to run, even if it's full of ghosts. Camille's eyes scanned the crowd, not expecting anything. And then, she stopped. There he was, Noah Stratton, the man who once swore forever, the man who now stood just a few feet away, next to someone who should have never been there, Serena Vale, Camille's half-sister. Arms crossed, lips curled in amusement, Serena looked at Camille like she'd already won. Noah didn't waste time. "I'm with Serena now," he said, voice steady, almost rehearsed. "You were never enough." The words didn't just hurt, they hollowed, but what followed cut deeper. Serena held up her phone. Her voice was sweet, venom-laced. "You think I won't do it? I have the messages. I'll twist them, post them. By morning, you'll be a joke." Camille's stomach turned. She could already hear the notifications, see strangers forming opinions about a version of her that didn't exist. Her mouth opened, barely forming the words, "You wouldn't?" Serena's laugh was cold. "Try me." In her panic, Camille stepped back and collided with someone behind her. Her suitcase nearly tipped, and she spun to apologize. That's when she saw him. He stood quietly, watching. A man in a plain coat, eyes calm like still water in a storm. There was something grounding about him, something unshakable. "I've been waiting," he said, stepping forward, placing a hand gently on Camille's shoulder. "We've got plans, remember?" Elias Thorne didn't raise his voice, but it held weight. Noah flinched, confused. Serena narrowed her eyes. "Who are you?" she snapped. "Just someone who doesn't like bullies," Elias replied, steady as ever. Noah scoffed, but turned away, muttering, as Serena followed, heels tapping like gunshots against the tile. The moment they disappeared, Camille finally breathed. She looked at Elias, still dazed. "You didn't have to do that." He offered a small smile, almost shy. "It looked like you needed someone." "I'm Elias." "Camille," she whispered. "Camille Renner." She should have felt safe. But the storm hadn't passed. The threat still lingered in her half-sister's eyes, in the silence that came after. And maybe it was the adrenaline. Maybe it was desperation. Or maybe, in that one moment, she realized she had nothing left to lose. Her voice came out quiet, trembling, but clear. "Elias, I know this sounds insane, but will you marry me?" He blinked. She rushed on. "Not for real, just legally. If I'm married, her threats won't stick. It'll buy me time. That's all I need." Elias studied her, really looked at her, like he was trying to see the parts of her she was too tired to hide. Then he nodded. "All right, but we do it on our terms. We call it off whenever you want." Camille let out a shaky breath. "Deal." And just like that, two strangers walked out into the snow toward a courthouse, a piece of paper, and a decision that would change everything. She could still hear Serena's laughter echoing in her ears when the idea struck wild, desperate, and just crazy enough to work. Camille turned to the man who had stepped into her chaos without hesitation, her voice barely louder than the hum of the airport. "Elias," she said, eyes locked on his. "What I'm about to ask will sound completely insane." He waited, silent. "Will you marry me?" she breathed. "Not for real, just legally. If I'm married, Serena's lies won't spread the way she wants them to. It'll give me time, just a little space to breathe. Elias blinked, eyebrows lifting just slightly. He was used to high-stakes moments. He'd spent years in the military, making decisions most people couldn't imagine. But nothing in his past had prepared him for this, a stranger asking him to become her shield by becoming her husband. And yet, when he looked into Camille's face, saw the trembling in her hands, the fire fighting through her fear, he felt something stir. Not pity, not obligation, something quieter, stronger. After a long breath, he nodded. "If we do this," he said slowly, "we end it whenever you want. No strings. Deal?" Relief poured across Camille's face. Deal. They didn't wait. The ride to Eldom City's late-night clerk office was a blur of city lights and unspoken thoughts. Outside, the streets shimmered with holiday glow, soft string lights wrapped around lampposts, snowflakes catching in halos under streetlights. But inside the cab, Camille sat rigid, staring out the window, trying to quiet the storm inside her. At the clerk's desk, beneath buzzing fluorescent lights, they filled out forms in silence. Their fingers brushed once as they signed their names. Camille noticed how steady his hands were. Hers shook. The clerk, a woman in thick glasses with tired eyes, barely glanced at them as she stamped the certificate. "Congratulations," she mumbled, sliding the paper across the counter. Camille stared at the document in her hands. Her name now sat beside his Camille Thorne, married to a man whose full name she hadn't known an hour ago. Outside, the night had deepened. Wind tugged at her coat as they stepped back into the cold. The city was quieter now, blanketed by fresh snow, like the world had paused just long enough for her to breathe. She looked over at Elias, breath visible in the chill. What happens now? He gave a half shrug, that same faint smile tugging at his lips. Now? We figure it out. For tonight, he added, you're safe. Camille nodded. Her heart was still racing. She had just married a stranger to outwit a scandal, and the weight of that truth hadn't fully landed yet. Not in her chest, not in her bones. They went separate ways, agreeing to meet again the next day. As she walked toward her small apartment in Brooklyn Hollow, Camille felt a strange cocktail of emotions, swirling gratitude, fear, and something she couldn't quite name. She unlocked her door and stepped into her modest one-bedroom. It was the only space in the world that still felt like hers. Worn, sofa, tiny kitchen, a window that looked down onto a sleepy street. She dropped her suitcase with a soft thud and stood still. In her bag, the marriage certificate felt heavier than anything she'd packed. Across the city, Elias entered a small hotel near the heart of Eldom. He carried nothing but a military duffel, tossed carelessly over one shoulder. The room was plain sterile, even but familiar in its simplicity, a quiet contrast to the truth he carried. He wasn't just a drifting veteran. He was Elias Thorne, CEO of Thorne Holdings, a real estate and tech empire that stretched across coasts. But Camille didn't know any of that. To her, he was just a man who stood up for her when no one else would, and he liked that. He sat at the edge of the bed, the room dark except for the faint glow from the street below. The memory of her voice echoed in his mind. Her fire, her quiet plea. He didn't know why he said yes, only that something in her reminded him of what it meant to protect not as a soldier, but as a human being. Tomorrow, reality would return, full of questions and consequences. But tonight, as snow wrapped the city in silence, two strangers drifted into sleep, on opposite sides of Eldom, bound by ink and instinct, their fates beginning to intertwine in ways neither could yet understand. There was something about her vulnerability that lingered in Elias's mind like a melody half remembered. He couldn't name the feeling, but it stayed with him, even as the city blurred past the taxi windows, even as he drifted into the stillness of his hotel room that night. By morning, a message lit up his phone. Camille, can you come over? We should talk through how this will work. He arrived at noon, no hesitation in his step, just that quiet, contained steadiness she remembered from the night before. When she opened the door, Camille looked different, not in appearance, but in the way she carried herself, guarded but not closed off. There was something in her eyes that said she hadn't slept much. Thanks for coming, she said softly, motioning toward the couch. I figured we should make a plan. Elias nodded, taking a seat without fuss. We're married on paper, at least. What do you need from me? Camille began pacing, her fingers restlessly twisting the edge of her sweater. If Serena thinks I've moved on, she might stop. The rumors, the threats. If you could, stay here for a little while, just until things calm down. He considered it. I don't have anywhere lined up yet anyway. Sure, I can stay. And just like that, they began living under one roof. His belongings fit into one corner of her modest apartment. A duffel bag, a shaving kit, a few neatly folded shirts. It wasn't much, but it shifted the energy of her space. The first few days passed like a slow, tentative waltz, two strangers learning each other's rhythms. Camille worked from her laptop at the kitchen table, eyes flickering between design software and the clock. Elias mostly stayed in the background, glued to his phone, claiming to job hunt. But he always noticed when something needed fixing: the leaky faucet, the uneven cabinet door. He went out for groceries, cooked dinner. One night, the scent of garlic and fresh basil drifted through the apartment, surprising her. You made this? She asked, watching him stir pasta in a cast-iron pot. Elias grinned. Military bases are boring. You pick up things. She laughed, an unfiltered sound that caught even her by surprise. For a moment, the heaviness between them lifted, replaced by something lighter. That evening, over steaming bowls of pasta, Camille found herself speaking about things she hadn't said aloud in years. My mom passed when I was 15, she said, eyes on her food. Cancer. My dad remarried 6 months later. Serena's mom. I didn't belong anymore. I left at 18. Haven't been back. Elias paused mid-bite, his expression softening. That's rough. Sounds like you've been alone for a long time. Camille nodded faintly. Pretty much. What about you? She asked after a moment. He hesitated, then offered the truth at least, a version of it. Military life. My parents passed a while back. No siblings. It's just me. It was enough for now. Their fragile connection began to strengthen in small, unexpected ways. The quiet exchange of dishes, the shared silence as snow dusted the windows, until one night, Camille pulled out a bottle of red wine left over from a client gift and 2 mismatched glasses. They sat on the couch, legs just barely touching, the city's glow flickering through the window. She took a sip, then turned to him, voice softer than before. I still don't know why you said yes. You didn't even know me. Elias met her gaze, steady as ever. You looked like someone worth helping. That was enough. The air shifted, charged, uncertain. Her hand brushed his. He didn't pull away, not immediately. But then he stood, sudden and tense. I'll take the couch, he said, voice rough with restraint. He grabbed a blanket, settled on the worn cushions, and turned away. Camille sat frozen, heart beating too fast, questions lingering on her lips, but none spoken. Morning came like a wave crashing into glass. Camille's phone lit up with a notification. A screenshot from Serena. An old text Camille had sent to Noah, plastered online with a mocking caption, still obsessed. Pathetic. Her stomach dropped. She showed it to Elias with shaking hands. She's starting again. Before she could spiral, there was a knock at the door. She opened it, and there stood Serena, phone in hand, smile sharp. "Just thought I'd check in. See how the loser's doing," she said, peering inside. Her eyes landed on Elias. "Who's this, your rebound?" "He looks broke." Camille clenched her fists, ready to fire back, but Elias stepped forward calmly, voice like ice. "Elias Thorne, her husband." "And you're interrupting our morning," Serena blinked, thrown off. "Husband? You're lying." Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. Inside lay a silver bracelet, clean, elegant, unmistakably expensive. He handed it to Camille without looking at Serena. "Put it on," he said. Camille slipped it over her wrist, eyes wide. Elias turned back to Serena. "Believe it now?" Serena's mouth twisted. "This isn't over." She stormed off, the click of her heels fading like thunder in the distance. Camille stared at the bracelet, then at Elias. "That looks expensive." He shrugged. "Had it lying around. Figured it'd shut her up." She didn't ask where it really came from, but in her chest, something shifted. Not just gratitude, not just relief. For the first time in a long time, Camille felt protected. "Husband?" Serena scoffed, scanning Elias with disbelief. "You're lying." Without a word, Elias reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a small velvet box, something he'd picked up that morning on instinct. He handed it to Camille, his eyes never leaving Serena. "Open it." Camille flipped the lid, revealing a silver bracelet so sleek and refined it seemed out of place in her modest apartment. Its surface shimmered faintly under the light, subtle, elegant, and unmistakably expensive. Camille's fingers hesitated before she slipped it on. It hugged her wrist like it belonged there, like it had been waiting. Elias turned to Serena. "Believe it now?" Serena's expression cracked. Her smugness dissolved, replaced by something darker envy. She fumbled for a comeback, but came up empty. "This isn't over," she hissed, turning sharply on her heel. Her voice echoed through the hallway like a door slamming shut. The silence that followed was thick. Camille stared at the bracelet. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice quiet. "It looks like it costs more than my rent." Elias gave a half shrug, effortlessly dodging. Had it lying around, figured it might shut her up. She didn't press. She could have. But instead, a quiet thank you left her lips simple, sincere, and he nodded, as if that was all he'd hoped for. They sat back on the sofa, the half-finished glasses of wine forgotten. The bracelet shimmered every time her wrist moved, a soft reminder of the man who had stood beside her when she needed it most. And for the first time in what felt like years, Camille didn't feel entirely alone. Elias sat beside her, one arm draped across the back of the couch, his eyes on the window where snow was beginning to fall again. The weight of his secret pressed harder now. He wasn't just a former soldier. He wasn't a drifter. He was Elias Thorne, heir and CEO of one of the largest private empires in the country. But Camille didn't know. Not yet. And the longer he was near her, the harder it became to let that version of himself back in. As the snow blanketed the city outside, Camille locked the door behind her and exhaled. She felt strangely safe. Serena's threats hadn't vanished, but Elias's presence acted like a wall between her and the worst of it. She glanced at him, already half asleep on the couch. The blanket pulled over his chest. His face was peaceful, but something in her wondered, "What are you really running from, Elias Thorne?" As if sensing her gaze, Elias cracked an eye open and offered the faintest of nods. Tomorrow the questions would come, the complications, but tonight the apartment held something fragile and rare, a quiet truce between two souls who hadn't planned to find each other. The days stretched like taffy, soft and slow. Snow piled against the windows as a week slipped quietly by. Camille, once used to living in solitude, found herself adjusting to his presence in ways that surprised her. He rose early, always the first to the kitchen, the smell of brewing coffee filling the small space. By evening, he was fixing broken lamps, chopping vegetables, humming quietly as he cooked. He didn't ask for anything, just existed, warmly, gently. And Camille, who had built walls without even realizing, felt them begin to lower, brick by quiet brick. The bracelet never left her wrist, a constant reminder of his stand against Serena, a symbol of something deeper neither of them had words for. But while Camille opened slowly, like a winter flower, Elias lived a double life in silence. By day, he was the man she knew, quiet, kind, full of calm strength. But at night, he disappeared for an hour or two, always with an excuse, always vague. In truth, he was slipping away to a hidden corner of the city, using an old hotel payphone to contact his assistant, Owen Calder. "Keep things quiet," Elias told him. "No one can know I'm gone." "There's talk," Owen warned. "The board's asking questions. They won't wait forever." "I'm not ready," Elias replied, eyes lost in the dark. "Not yet." He didn't tell Owen why. He didn't say it was because Camille Renner, this unexpected force of courage and grace, had pulled him into a quieter, more human version of himself. And he wasn't ready to leave that behind. One evening, Elias looked at her across the kitchen table and said gently, "You've been locked in here too long. Let's get some air." She hesitated, suspicious. "Where?" "There's a charity event. A friend had extra tickets." Camille didn't have a gown, didn't have designer heels. Just a simple black dress she'd worn to a friend's wedding once. But when she stepped into the skyscraper lobby of the Varelli Center, with its golden chandeliers and mirrored walls, she still turned heads. Not because of what she wore, but because of how Elias looked at her. He moved through the crowd like he belonged, nodding to strangers who seemed to recognize him. Camille didn't notice at first, until a tall man in a navy suit approached, all confidence and charm. "Mr. Thorne?" he greeted, extending a hand. "Good to see you back." Camille froze, her glass halfway to her lips. Elias didn't flinch. He shook the man's hand with practiced ease. "Good to see you too. This is Camille, my wife." Camille blinked, trying to catch up. "Mr. Thorne? Good to see you back." She turned to him as the man walked away, her voice sharp beneath the music and laughter. "Why did he call you that?" Elias sighed, setting down his drink. "We should talk. Somewhere quiet." "My wife," he said, effortlessly, as though the title had always belonged to her. Camille's glass paused midair. Her eyes darted from the stranger in the suit to Elias. The man gave a polite nod and disappeared into the crowd. She turned sharply. "Why did he call you Mr. Thorne like it means something?" Elias set his drink down, his jaw tightening. "We should talk. Somewhere quieter." He led her through the glowing ballroom, past gold-tinted mirrors and murmuring guests, until they stepped out onto a high balcony. Below them, Eldam City glittered in silence, unaware of the unraveling moment happening above. Camille crossed her arms, bracing against the cold. "I'm not just a soldier," Elias said finally. "I run Thorne Holdings. Real estate, technology, a few other ventures. That's who I am." The words fell into the space between them, like stone into still water. "You're a CEO?" Camille whispered, stunned. "And you never told me?" He met her gaze, steady. "When we met, you didn't care about money or titles. You saw me, not the empire. I liked that. I needed it." She stepped back, her breath sharp against the winter air. "So all this time, you've been lying." "Not lying," Elias said, softer now. "Just waiting. I was going to tell you." She looked away. The bracelet on her wrist, once a token of protection, now felt heavier than gold. I need time, she said. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back inside, leaving Elias alone in the cold, the weight of everything unsaid pressing hard against his chest. The next morning arrived too early. Camille's phone rang an unfamiliar number flashing on screen. She hesitated, then picked up. A cold voice cut through. Camille, it's your father. We need to talk. Come to the house. Now. The line went dead before she could answer. She hadn't spoken to Victor Renner in years, but something in his voice, urgent, worn, made her pause. She told Elias, who didn't hesitate, I'm coming with you. An hour later, their car crept through the snow-laced suburbs outside Eldam. The house loomed ahead, once proud, now tired, cracked shutters, faded paint, a relic of a family that had fallen apart long ago. Inside, Victor stood waiting, gray, overtaking his once black hair. Beside him, his second wife, Clarice Vale, Serena's mother, watched with ice in her eyes. The business is collapsing, Victor began without preamble. Your mother's legacy. Renner Design is weeks away from bankruptcy. Camille folded her arms. You've ignored me for years. Why now? Clarice stepped in, voice sharp. Because you owe us. There's a client, powerful, interested in investing, but only if you meet him. Camille blinked. You want me to be sold off? It's practical, Victor snapped. You're a Renner. Act like it. Elias stepped forward then, his voice calm but cold. She's not a bargaining chip. And you will not speak to her like that. Clarice sneered. And who are you? Her bodyguard? Elias's jaw clenched. Her husband. And I don't let anyone bully my wife, Victor scoffed. How convenient. Just in time to be useless. Camille's voice trembled, but she stood firm. You don't own me. I rid the will. Mom left me half the company, and this house. Victor's face darkened. That's not yours anymore. You walked away. Elias pulled out his phone. I have lawyers. We'll see what's yours and what isn't. And if you've tampered with her inheritance, I promise you, it ends here. The air thickened, tension like static. Clarice's smile twisted. You'll regret this. But Elias didn't flinch. He guided Camille out, his hand resting lightly on her back. In the car, she was silent, staring out the window until the snow blurred everything into white. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. I did, he said. They don't get to hurt you anymore. Back in her apartment, Camille dug through old boxes until she found it, her mother's will. Her breath caught. It was real. She owned half of Renner Design, half of the house. Her father had buried it, erased her. Elias made a call. Sarah Clean, he said, speaking to a woman on the other end. Top corporate litigation. Tell her to prepare everything. We're taking it back. Days passed. Then Serena resurfaced, this time online. A photo of Camille from years ago, captioned in neon letters desperate. Broke. Some wife. The comments rolled in vicious, mocking. Camille's stomach churned. But before panic could take hold, Elias sat beside her, calm as always. Let me handle it. He called Owen. Trace the post and prepare a statement. Hours later, Thorn Holdings posted across every platform Mr. Elias Thorn stands fully behind his wife, Camille Renner. Any defamatory content will be met with legal action. The internet shifted, and somewhere inside Camille's chest, something unfamiliar stirred. Not fear, not shame, but power, and a quiet, growing sense that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in the fight anymore. By nightfall, everything had changed. The official statement from Thorn Holdings was everywhere. Bold, unapologetic Mr. Elias Thorn stands firmly by his wife, Camille Renner. False claims will face legal consequences. It wasn't just a press release. It was a line drawn in the snow. And surprisingly, people listened. Serena's smear campaign began to crack. Support poured in, comments from strangers offering solidarity, messages from old friends Camille never thought she'd hear from again. The tide was turning. Meanwhile, across town, Tyler Stratton, once smug, now unraveling, faced his own reckoning. Owen had found everything: falsified resumes, inflated references, a hidden college scandal from years ago. Elias barely looked up when Owen delivered the update over the phone. He's out. Fired. Effective immediately. Tyler didn't take it well. He threatened to sue. Elias only shrugged. Let him try. Camille had overheard it all, standing silently by the doorway. She looked at Elias, piecing it together. You did that? For me? He didn't try to soften it. He hurt you. I don't let that slide. She studied him, this man she had married on impulse, now fighting battles she never asked him to. Something inside her cracked a little. In the quietest part of her voice, she whispered, Well. He turned to her, his gaze gentle. I'm starting to care more than I planned. The words weren't loud, but they stayed. Long after he fell asleep on the sofa, long after the city lights dimmed beyond the frosted windows, Camille sat alone at the kitchen table, her mother's will spread out in front of her. Her fingers traced the edges of the paper absently, but her mind was somewhere else on him. On the way he stood between her and the storm, on the bracelet still wrapped around her wrist, a silent echo of his presence. He wasn't just a stranger anymore, not to her, and Elias, his secret, now out. His walls down, watched her from across the room when she wasn't looking, wondering what it meant to truly be seen and still chosen. But peace is rarely still for long. Across the city, in a penthouse far removed from their quiet apartment, Samantha Vale paced the polished floors in designer heels, eyes gleaming with calculated spite. She was sharp, ambitious, and hell-bent on control. Once Elias's lover, now his enemy. Beside her stood Miles Thorne, Elias's cousin, 32, brilliant, and always hungry for what didn't belong to him. She's his weakness, Samantha hissed, her voice cool and measured. That wife of his? She's the crack in his armor. Miles smirked. He's distracted. The Silver Mist project's on the line. If he slips, the board turns. I take the lead. Their plan came together, quickly, precise, and vicious. Samantha dug into Camille's past, unearthing old photos, twisting truths into damaging narratives. A post went live under a fake account, Camille Renner Gold Digger, in a paper marriage. Thorne heir trapped in a lie. It spread like wildfire, comments piling in, each one crueler than the last. Business blogs picked it up. Rumors surfaced. Whispers turned to questions, and then the burner phone rang. Camille answered, her voice cautious. The reply was disguised, distorted. Leave him, or we ruin you both. Silver Mist's on the line. She froze. They knew about the project, and worse, they knew something she hadn't told anyone, not even Elias. She was 3 weeks pregnant. The truth had barely settled into her bones, and now it pulsed through her with panic. Her vision blurred, her fingers tightened around the phone. Just then, Elias stirred in the next room, drawn by the silence that had turned too still. He walked in, half awake, but alert the moment he saw her pale face and trembling hands. What's wrong? He asked, his voice low but urgent. Camille handed him the phone, showed him the post, the call log. Her voice shook. They're after you. Because of me. Elias's expression hardened. His jaw clenched as he scrolled through the screen. This is Samantha Vale, he said through his teeth. And Miles, he's wanted my seat since we were kids. He looked at Camille, no longer just the woman he'd married to escape a scandal, but the person who had somehow become his center. They think you're my Achilles' heel, Elias said. his voice low but sharp. But they're wrong. We fight this together. He grabbed his phone, calling Owen without hesitation. Trace the post, shut it down, and get security on Camille. Now. But storms don't wait for your plans. That same afternoon, Camille's phone lit up with a name she hadn't seen in years. Victor Renner, her father. His voice was frayed, urgent. Come to the house, alone. It's about Eleanor. Camille's heart stopped. Eleanor Renner, her grandmother, her compass, the only person who had ever stood by her. Elias watched her face pale. I'll drive you. But Camille shook her head. If it's really her, I have to go. You stay. Keep the company safe. Elias hesitated, then stepped forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead, soft, lingering. Call me, he said, if anything feels wrong. She nodded and walked out into the snow. The drive north blurred past white roads, bare trees, the silence before impact. Victor waited inside the old family home, older than she remembered, the years having scraped him hollow. Clarice Vale, his wife, stood nearby like a shadow with teeth. She's sick, Victor said, her heart's failing. She's asking for you. Camille moved to push past him, but he caught her wrist. There's a catch, he said, his tone cold. Sign over your shares. The house. Everything your mother left you. It's the only way we save Renner Design. Camille froze, blood running cold. You're lying. She'd never ask that. She pulled away, bolting up the stairs. There in the dim corner of her childhood room sat Eleanor, frail, pale, but awake. Her white hair glowed faintly beneath the lamp's soft light. Camille, she whispered, I knew you'd come. Victor followed, his voice rising. Sign it, or we lose everything. Camille turned to her grandmother, pleading with her eyes. Eleanor slowly shook her head. No, I don't want that. He's been pressuring me for weeks. My heart can't take much more. Camille knelt beside her, anger rising like flame. You've been wearing her Dumpton. For money, she spat at her father. You're killing her. Victor grabbed her arm. It's business, Camille. Grow up. She yanked free, and with shaking hands, dialed Elias. It's Eleanor, she said, breath tight. Come. Now. But elsewhere, darkness moved faster. Tyler Stratton, humiliated by his fall from Thorn Holdings, fumed in silence. His mother, Diane, stood beside him, cold, cruel, and feeding the fire. Elias did this to you, she hissed, handing over a key. End him. That night, on a snow-laced highway just outside Westchester, Tyler spotted Elias's car. The headlights caught in the frost. His fingers tightened on the wheel. He accelerated. One hard swerve, and metal screamed. The car spun off the road into a ditch, the trees swallowing it whole. Then, silence. Blood glinted on the glass. Elias lay slumped, unmoving. Back at the house, Camille waited. Her phone buzzed once. Then again. No answer. Eleanor's hand gripped hers, faint but warm. You're strong, child, she whispered. Stronger than all of them. But before Camille could respond, Eleanor's hand loosened. Her eyes closed. Her chest fell still. No, Camille choked, clutching her. Please. She called an ambulance, but it was too late. Eleanor Renner, the only home Camille had ever known, was gone. The paramedics covered her body. Camille collapsed against the wall, the grief hitting like a wave she couldn't outrun. Hours passed. The world spun. Then her phone rang again, Owen on the other end, voice tight with fear. Camille. Elias was in a crash. He's in the hospital, unconscious. We think it was deliberate. Everything around her tilted. Her legs barely held as she grabbed her keys and fled the house. She drove through sleet and tears, the lights of Eldam blurring into streaks. At the hospital, The halls felt endless, sterile, cold. She finally found him, wires in his arms, bruises along his temple, machines humming a lifeline. She sank into the chair beside him, her fingers wrapping around his. "Don't leave me too," she whispered. "Please, not you." She was pregnant, alone, surrounded by enemies, but something sharp and steady rose inside her. She would not break. The next morning, inside the glass towers of Thorne Holdings, Miles Thorne stepped into the boardroom like a man claiming his kingdom. With Elias in a coma, he moved quickly. He called an emergency vote. "He's unfit to lead," Miles said, calmly. "His wife is a liability. And Silvermist is at risk. The company needs a new direction." He didn't even try to hide his ambition. Eyes shifted around the table. Doubt seeded. Opportunism stirred. But what Miles didn't know was that Camille Renner had just arrived, and she wasn't done fighting. CMNBN Kien Tri Kung Min. O Na Cao Trào Tí Theo sĩ Câu chuyện Đi ấy là B Nam Vì L A hoàn toàn phá N 8 Tí Vip ta Sự theo ghi ân ví hình Dầu Xí Nè Xúc Có chỉ Ở Su sâu tâm lý và Meta cha ta ý N Nè và Itinta and Shining Stories. Các nhân vật và BDAC và Segi. The news hit Camille like a match striking dry wood. Miles Thorne was pushing through Silvermist Elias's legacy project as if Elias had never existed. His claim for power was gaining ground, his lies dressed in expensive suits and shareholder smiles. But Owen told her everything. "You need to go," he said. "Now." Camille wiped her tears, grabbed the will her mother had left behind, and threw on her coat. She didn't walk to the Thorne Holdings headquarters. She marched, her steps cutting through the frostbitten morning like a blade. Inside the boardroom, men in dark suits and carefully measured voices fell silent when she entered. She didn't wait. "You don't get to take this," Camille said, her voice slicing clean through the air. "Elias built Silvermist. He built this company. And I'm here for him." Miles leaned back in his seat, smug. You're nobody." Camille walked to the center of the table, placed the will down, and looked each of them in the eye. "I'm Camille Renner Thorne," she said. "I own half of Renner Design. I'm Elias's legal wife, and I've got more skin in this than any of you." Silence. Then Owen stepped forward, sliding a folder across the table. "Per Elias's written directives," he said, calm but firm, "Camille is named his legal proxy during absence or incapacity." The tide shifted. It was slow, almost imperceptible, but it moved. Camille stood taller, though her pregnancy was still a secret she held close. A quiet strength pulsed beneath her ribs, growing by the day. Outside the room, Samantha's smear campaign continued to swirl online, but Camille, with Owen's help, issued her own response. "Thorne Holdings stands united. We do not break under falsehoods. We build together." Public opinion hesitated, then tilted toward her. Even Serena's last venomous posts drowned beneath a wave of unexpected support clients, employees, strangers, all moved by Camille's grace under pressure. But the attacks didn't stop. That night, Tyler Stratton called her, drunk, slurring, furious. "You ruined me," he snarled through the line. "You'll pay." She hung up, blocked him, focused only on Elias and the child she was carrying. At the hospital, the room was filled with soft beeps and the scent of antiseptic. Camille sat by Elias's side, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She held his hand. "I lost Eleanor," she whispered. "I can't lose you too." Then softer, her words, barely breath. "We've got a baby coming, Elias. please. Fight. The nurse checked his vitals. Nothing had changed. No promises. Just the dull rhythm of hope refusing to die. Across the city, plots thickened like poisoned wine. Miles sat in a dimly lit cafe, Samantha opposite him, her red nails tapping the table in slow, dangerous rhythm. She's tougher than we thought, Samantha admitted, eyes dark. But Elias is still out. That gives us time. We break her. Miles nodded. Push harder, quietly. No headlines. Undermine her from the inside. Meanwhile, in a crumbling motel on the edge of Eldom, Diane Stratton nursed a drink while her son, Tyler, paced like a caged animal. She took everything from me, Tyler muttered, rage low and constant. No, Diane whispered. He did, and she's just the means to destroy him. Then we finish what we started. But while they schemed, the tide had already begun to turn. Back in the hospital, Owen was working in the shadows. He'd hired a private investigator, dug into the crash, studied tire marks, paint transfers, found a witness, a truck, speeding from the scene the night Elias was hit. It was no accident, Owen told Camille over the phone, his voice low. We're closing in. Camille nodded, her fingers tightening around her mother's will. She hung up and made one more call to Sarah Clean, the sharp, unflinching attorney who had taken up her mother's legacy. This wasn't just business pressure, Camille said. Victor Renner is responsible for Eleanor's death. She wasn't sick, she was being crushed. Let's prove it, Sarah said. And just like that, Camille stepped into the role no one thought she could carry. Not just wife, not just survivor, but a force, a leader, and a mother. Pressure had killed Eleanor Renner. That much Camille knew in her bones. Now it was time to prove it. Sarah Clean filed charges swiftly, her legal team unearthing the truth layer by layer. Medical records, stress-related episodes, doctor's notes. It was all there, Eleanor's quiet decline, driven not by age or illness, but by Victor's unrelenting demands. Camille pressed forward, but in the middle of the storm, something shifted. At the hospital, while Camille sat beside Elias, her hand wrapped around his fingers twitched. A flicker, barely a movement, but it was enough. Her breath caught. Elias? She whispered, her grip tightening. His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, dazedly, he opened his eyes. Camille, he croaked, voice rough and fragile. A laugh burst from her lips, thick with tears. She pressed her forehead to his, relief crashing through her like a wave. You're back. Thank God. The doctor rushed in, confirming he was stable, but recovery would take time. Elias squeezed her hand weakly. What happened? So she told him everything. From Eleanor's death to the hostile takeover, from the boardroom betrayals to the smear campaigns. His face hardened as the truth unfolded. They don't win, he said quietly. We end this. Still in a hospital bed, Elias called Owen. Get everything. I want names, proof, and find the damn truck. Owen didn't disappoint. Within hours, the puzzle came together. Cybersecurity traced the burner phone to Samantha. Emails leaked from Miles revealed he'd shared confidential details of the Silver Mist project with rival firms. Security footage caught Tyler's truck leaving the crash scene. Diane's bank records showed payments to a mechanic for fast repairs. Elias didn't hesitate. Turn it over, all of it, to the police. Justice came like a winter wind. Samantha was arrested in her penthouse, her screams echoing as handcuffs clicked. This is a mistake, but no one listened. Miles was taken from his office, the smugness draining from his face. His allies slithered away, eyes down. And Tyler? He landed behind bars, rage silenced by steel and consequence. Diane followed, their shared vengeance rotting in the shadows of a small-town cell. Days later, Camille stood alone in the Renner family home. The walls still held Eleanor's memory, soft, quiet, proud. She had fought for this, but she didn't need to keep it. She sold the house, sold Renner Designs. The money millions went into something Eleanor would have loved, the Eleanor Renner Foundation, dedicated to children without families. It's what she would have wanted, Camille told Elias, her voice calm, steady, full. Elias nodded, leaning on a cane, but standing strong. You're honoring her. That's enough. They left the house together, the past settling behind them like melting snow. Spring arrived in Eldam City. Elias, fully recovered, reclaimed his seat at Thorn Holdings. This time Camille stood at his side. In front of the board, he spoke with quiet conviction. Miles betrayed this company. Samantha too. But we are not broken. Silver Mist lives, and so do we. The boardroom erupted in applause. Outside, the final shadows of their enemies faded. Even Serena's last bitter post fell flat, buried beneath waves of support for Camille, who had become something none of them expected, a symbol of resilience, of grace, of light. Weeks later, in a quiet chapel on the edge of the Hudson, Camille and Elias stood hand in hand. This time, the vows were real. Camille wore a simple white dress, her belly just beginning to show. Owen beamed from the pews. Sarah sat beside him, proud. You may kiss, the priest said. Elias pulled her close. And their kiss was not for show, it was a promise, of something forged in fire, but built to last. They moved into a Manhattan townhouse, sunlight filling the rooms. Camille painted a nursery in soft yellow, while Elias assembled a crib, focused as ever. One evening, they stood on the balcony, the city glowing beneath them. Camille rested her head on his shoulder. I've lost so much, she whispered. Eleanor, my mother, the years I can't get back. She looked up at him, eyes warm. But you're my light through all of it. Elias turned to her, brushing her cheek. And you're mine. We have a future now, Camille. You, me, and this little one. He placed a hand on her stomach. A smile bloomed between them. Behind them, the nursery waited soft light, a rocking chair, a mobile of stars gently spinning. On the shelf, a framed photo of Eleanor, her presence still watching over them. Now, Camille, you, me, and this little one, Elias whispered, his hand resting gently on her growing belly. A smile broke across his face, the kind that rises not in triumph, but in peace. In the nursery, soft light filtered through gauzy curtains. A rocking chair sat by the window, waiting. Above the crib, a mobile spun slowly, its tiny stars swaying in the quiet rhythm of the home they had built. Camille framed a photo of Eleanor, her grandmother's warm eyes and timeless grace, and placed it gently on the shelf. A silent guardian, a presence that would never truly leave. The Eleanor Renner Foundation had just launched its first grant, a shelter for children in Eldam, a seed of care planted in Eleanor's name, one that would grow far beyond them. Outside, the city moved on. Taxis honked, lights changed, lives collided, but inside their townhouse, time softened. The world quieted. Here, in these walls, healing had found a place to stay. Camille often thought back to that night at Windermere Airport. The panic, the strangers, the impossible question, and the man who had stepped forward, not to rescue her, but to stand with her. She had married Elias to outrun a lie. But somewhere along the way, she had run straight into something real. He had hidden his world, afraid it would define him. But she had seen through it and loved him anyway. They had faced betrayal, grief, schemes meant to shatter them. But they hadn't shattered. They had grown. Now, as the baby kicked a quiet reminder of all that was still to come, Camille smiled. She reached for Elias's hand, her fingers sliding easily into his. The silver bracelet still adorned her wrist, worn smooth by time, a symbol not just of where they began, but of how far they had come. "We made it," she said, her voice barely more than a breath. Elias nodded, brushing a kiss against her temple. "We did," he whispered, "and we're just getting started." Outside, the river caught the last light of day, turning gold. Inside, the air was soft, still, full. Their love wasn't loud or grand, but it was true. It was earned, and it was enough. The night wrapped around them like a lullaby, a quiet triumph over everything they had endured. The city hummed, beyond the glass, a distant, familiar song. And as they stepped back inside, closing the door behind them, they didn't look back. They didn't need to. Because finally, they were home. Some stories don't begin with love. They begin with brokenness, with fear, with running. But the best ones, they find healing in the unexpected. And when they do, they don't just survive, they bloom. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of Camille and Elias's story. We hope it reminded you that even in the darkest moments, there's always a path toward healing, love, and quiet strength, often in the most unexpected places. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, we're truly grateful. From all of us at Shining Stories, thank you for listening, for feeling, and for letting us be a small part of your day. Until next time, stay kind, stay open, and never stop believing in new beginnings.